I signed the deed transfer on a Tuesday morning in October, and my daughter did not stay to watch me do it. She had already left the room to take a phone call. And I sat alone at the kitchen table, with a pen in my hand and my name on a line, and I signed it without a word. What she did not know, what none of them knew, was that I had made a small change to the paperwork the week before. A quiet change. The kind you would not notice unless you were looking for it, and no one was looking. My name is Eleanor. I am 74 years old. I taught 8th grade English in Clover Ridge, Virginia, for 31 years. And I have lived in the same house since 1979, the year my husband Harold and I moved in with 2 suitcases, a second-hand sofa, and a belief that we were building something that would last. The house is not large. It sits on just over 3 acres at the end of a gravel road, and there is a vegetable garden on the east side that Harold planted the first summer, and an old oak tree in the back that our daughter climbed as a girl, and our grandchildren climbed after her. I have never thought of it as valuable in the way that my daughter means when she uses that word. I have thought of it as home. Harold died 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end. I held his hand in the hospital room, and I told him things I had never said out loud before, and he smiled at me in a way that I will carry with me until my own last day. After he was gone, I went back to the house on the gravel road, and I sat in the kitchen, and I looked at his coffee cup still in the dish rack where he had left it, and I understood for the first time what people mean when they say the quiet is too loud. My daughter's name is Sarah. She lives 40 minutes away in a suburb of Richmond with her husband David and their 2 children, a boy named Caleb and a girl named Maya, who is 9 and will argue with you about anything, and who I love more than I can say. Sarah and I have always had a complicated relationship. She is organized and practical in the way that Harold was not, in the way that I am not. And when she was growing up, I sometimes had the feeling that she was disappointed in us for being dreamers. She wanted things to be certain. Harold and I were always more comfortable with what might be. After Harold died, Sarah called more often. At first, I was grateful for this. I thought grief had softened something between us. I thought we were finding our way to each other in the way that loss sometimes allows. I made her coffee when she visited, and we sat at the kitchen table, and she asked questions about the house, about the property taxes, about whether I had thought about what I would do long term, and I answered honestly because she was my daughter, and I trusted her. I did not notice the shift at first. It was gradual. The questions became more specific. She started bringing David to the visits, which she had not done before when she came alone. David is an accountant, and he has the manner of someone who is always calculating something just behind his eyes. He would walk through the rooms while Sarah and I talked, and I would hear his footsteps on the floorboards upstairs, slow and deliberate, pausing in each room. One Sunday in September, they came together and sat across from me at the kitchen table, and Sarah put a folder down between us, and she opened it, and there were papers inside. She told me she had been doing research. She told me she had spoken to a real estate agent, a friend of David's, who had estimated the property. She slid a piece of paper toward me with a number on it. It was more than I expected. I looked at it for a moment, and then I looked at her. She said the house was too much for me to maintain alone. She said the property taxes were going up and would continue to go up. She said David had looked at the numbers, and the numbers did not work long term. She said there was a very good continuing care community in Henrico County, newer construction, activities, a dining room, other people my age. She said she had already toured it. She said she thought I would be comfortable there. I sat with my hands folded on the table, and I listened to all of this. I did not interrupt. Harold always said I had the patience of a woman who had spent 31 years waiting for 8th graders to arrive at the right answer on their own. He said it as a compliment. In that moment at the kitchen table, I was not sure it still was. When Sarah finished, I asked her one question. I asked her whether she had considered that I did not want to leave. She said, "Mom, it's not really about what we want. It's about what makes sense." I asked her what would happen to the house. She said they would sell it. She said the market was strong right now, and it would be irresponsible to wait. She said the money could go toward my care. She said David had put together a financial plan. She slid another piece of paper toward me. I did not look at it. I looked at my daughter. I thought about the oak tree in the backyard. I thought about Harold's coffee cup, which I had finally moved to the cabinet 3 months after he died, because I could not keep a dead man's dishes in the dish rack forever, though part of me had wanted to. I thought about the vegetable garden and the gravel road and the way the house smells in October when the windows are open and the leaves are coming down. I told her I would think about it. She told me not to take too long. She left the folder on the table when they went. I sat in the kitchen for a long time after their car left the driveway. I did not cry, which surprised me. I had expected to feel devastated, and instead I felt something cooler and more deliberate. The way I used to feel when a student turned in a paper they had not written themselves, and I had to decide how to respond. There was the obvious response. And there was the correct one. They were not always the same. I called my neighbor Ruth that evening. Ruth is 71, and she taught high school biology for 28 years, and she has no patience for nonsense of any kind, which is one of the reasons I have always liked her. I told her what Sarah had said. Ruth was quiet for a moment, and then she said, I said, Harold and I had used a man in town for the will, but he had retired. Ruth said she knew someone. She said she had used her when she was dealing with her brother's estate 2 years ago. She said the woman was sharp and she treated you like an adult. Her name was Patricia. Her office was in a building downtown, 2nd floor, with a window that looked out over the old hardware store that had closed during the pandemic and never reopened. I went on a Wednesday morning. I wore the blue blazer I used to wear for parent-teacher conferences because I wanted to feel like myself. Patricia was younger than I expected, maybe early 50s, with reading glasses on a chain and a directness about her that I found immediately reassuring. She asked me to sit and she asked me to tell her the situation. And I did. She did not interrupt me. When I finished, she asked several questions, specific and clear, and I answered them. She asked whether my name was still on the deed. I said it was. She asked whether Harold's estate had gone through probate. I said it had. 4 years ago. She asked whether I had signed anything in the folder Sarah had left. I said I had not. She nodded. She said, Mrs. Eleanor, your daughter cannot make you sell your house. She has no legal authority over your property. Her husband's financial plan has no standing. The continuing care community is not a decision she can make for you. Your home is yours. I said I understood that. I said I knew I did not have to sign anything, but I said I also knew my daughter. And I said that if I simply refused, she would not stop. She would come back with more papers and more plans and more reasons. And she would involve the grandchildren in ways that would be painful. And she would make every family gathering a negotiation, and she would wear me down the way water wears down stone, not because she was cruel, but because she believed she was right. And people who believe they are right are very difficult to stop by simply saying no. Patricia looked at me over her reading glasses for a moment. Then she said, You're not here because you don't know your rights. You're here because you want options. I said that was exactly right. She said, Well then, let's talk about options. We talked for 2 hours. By the time I left, I had a plan. It was not a dramatic plan. It did not involve confrontation or accusations or any of the things that would have made Harold uncomfortable. Harold did not like scenes. He preferred, as he used to say, to solve problems quietly so that they stayed solved. The plan involved Harold's name, Harold had always wanted to leave something permanent. He had grown up without much, and he had built a good life, and he cared about his community in the specific and unglamorous way of a man who coaches Little League for 14 years because the town needs coaches, not because anyone is watching. He had talked, in the years before he got sick, about whether there was a way to give something back. We had never gotten around to figuring out what that looked like. I decided to figure it out. Over the next 3 weeks, I worked with Patricia to establish the Harold James Whitfield Community Foundation. It was a charitable foundation under Virginia law, structured as a nonprofit. I transferred the property into the foundation's name. The foundation's stated purpose was to preserve and maintain the property for community use. To offer the garden space to a local school program Patricia helped me identify, and to support a small annual scholarship in Harold's name at the regional high school where he had once coached. I was named the lifetime director. The foundation could not be dissolved by anyone other than the board, which consisted of myself, Patricia, and Ruth. The house remained my residence for the duration of my life. That was written into the foundation documents clearly and without ambiguity. When I was gone, the property would pass to the foundation's purposes and not to any private individual. I want to be honest about something. I did not do this to punish Sarah. That is not who I want to be, and it is not who Harold would have recognized. I did it because the house was not mine alone. It was Harold's too. And it was the vegetable garden, and it was the oak tree, and it was 31 years of a marriage and a life and a set of choices made together, and none of that belonged to David's financial plan or Sarah's idea of what made sense. Some things are worth protecting in ways that go beyond money. I had spent 31 years trying to teach that to 8th graders with mixed results. I thought it was time to practice what I had preached. When the documents were finalized, I called Sarah and told her I had thought about what she had said and I was ready to talk. She sounded pleased when I said this. She called it being reasonable. She and David came the following Sunday. I made coffee. I set out the good cups, the ones with the small blue flowers on them that Harold's mother had given us as a wedding present. I sat across from them at the kitchen table the same way I had sat before. Sarah had a new folder. She opened it and began to explain the next steps. The real estate agent, the timeline, the facility in Henrico County that she had put a deposit on to hold a room. I let her finish. Then I put my own folder on the table. I slid it toward her and I told her to look at the first page. She picked it up. She read it. She read it again. She looked up at me. I told her the property had been placed in a charitable foundation 3 weeks ago. I told her the foundation was registered with the state and that the transfer was complete and properly recorded. I told her that the house remained my home for the rest of my life and that after I was gone it would go to the purposes Harold and I had chosen, which did not include a private sale. She said, "Mom, you can't do this." I said I already had. David took the folder from her and read it himself. He read it carefully, the way he read things, looking for the number that did not add up. After a while, he put it down. He did not say anything for a moment. Then he said, "This is not what we intended." I said I knew it wasn't. He said they had made arrangements. He mentioned the deposit on the room in Henrico County. He said it in a tone that implied I owed them something for the inconvenience. I looked at him for a moment, and then I looked at my daughter. I thought about Harold, who had told me once, after a particularly difficult school board meeting, that the best thing you could do when someone underestimated you was to let the results speak. I told Sarah I was not going anywhere. I told her she could get the deposit back or she could not, but that was not something I was going to be able to help her with. I told her I loved her, and I loved Caleb and Maya, and I wanted us to have Sunday dinners, and I wanted to watch my grandchildren climb the oak tree the way she had climbed it, and I would very much like to have that kind of life with her. But I said that what happened here today was not something I was going to pretend had not happened. I said that if she wanted a relationship with me, a real one, she was going to have to decide whether she could see me as a person or whether she only saw a property. She left without finishing her coffee. David followed her. I sat at the table for a long time after they left. It was November by then. The garden was done for the year, and I had put it to bed the way Harold taught me, turned the soil and covered it and left it to rest. The leaves were mostly down from the oak tree. The house was quiet in the way it has been quiet since Harold died. That particular quality of silence that used to feel like emptiness and has slowly become, with time, something more like peace. Ruth came over that evening with a bottle of wine she said she had been saving for something worth celebrating. We sat in the kitchen with the good cups, the ones with the blue flowers. Because we had drunk all the wine and moved on to tea, and she told me about her brother's estate and the way her family had fractured over it, and I told her about Harold and the coffee cup in the dish rack, and we sat there until it was late and the house was warm against the November cold outside. In the spring, 8 students from the middle school came on a Saturday morning to plant the garden. Their teacher, a young woman named Miss Torres, who wore her hair in 2 braids and spoke to me the way you speak to someone whose time is valuable and whose mind is intact, told me the students had been learning about community food systems. She asked if I would be willing to talk to them about the history of the garden. I said I would. I stood in Harold's garden in April with 8 12-year-olds who asked very good questions and needed very few of my answers because they were curious enough to find most of them on their own. And I thought that Harold would have loved this, and the thought did not hurt the way it used to. It felt more like gratitude. Sarah called in March. She did not apologize. Not exactly. She said she had been thinking. She said she had talked to a therapist, which surprised me. She said she thought she had been afraid after Harold died, and that the fear had come out wrong. I told her I understood fear. I told her I had been afraid too. We talked for almost an hour, which we had not done in a long time. She brought the children in April. The same weekend, the students came to the garden. Maya climbed the oak tree, and Caleb, who is 13 and considers himself too old for most things, eventually climbed it too when he thought no one was watching. I watched from the kitchen window and I did not say anything. I let him think it was his own idea. The scholarship fund awarded its first grant in June. A girl named Destiny from the regional high school who wanted to study environmental science. Patricia sent me a photograph from the ceremony. Destiny was holding a certificate with Harold's name on it, and she was smiling in the specific way of someone who has just been told that something they hoped for is actually going to happen. I put the photograph on the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a cardinal that Ruth brought me from a trip she took to see her sister in Nashville. Every morning when I go to the kitchen and I put on coffee and I look out the window at the garden waking up again for another season, I see it. Harold James Whitfield Community Foundation, in small type underneath, established in memory and in faith. I did not go to Henrico County. I did not sign their papers. I am still here. At the end of the gravel road, in the house, with the oak tree and the vegetable garden and the coffee cup, I finally allowed back into the dish rack because it turns out a dead man's dishes are not so different from alive ones, and keeping them in the cabinet does not bring him back. And having them out where I can see them does not hurt anymore. I am 74 years old. I taught English for 31 years. And I learned more than I taught, which I think is probably how it is supposed to work. I know that fear can look like practicality. I know that love and control are not the same thing, though they can feel similar from inside them. I know that some things are worth protecting quietly, without drama, without scenes, in the patient and deliberate way of someone who has been waiting a long time for the right answer and is not in a hurry. Harold knew that too. He always did. The house is yellow inside and full of light in the mornings, and mine and his. And still, After everything, ours.